Ethan Callaway and Lila Monroe seemed like an unlikely pair, a tech billionaire whose name was synonymous with power and innovation, and a rising art curator whose world revolved around beauty and creativity. But behind closed doors, their secret affair spiraled into a chilling story of obsession, surveillance, and betrayal, one that would erupt into a bombshell lawsuit exposing the dark side of wealth, control, and human desire. Ethan Callaway had become a name that resonated far beyond Silicon Valley. At 38, he was already considered a tech legend, the kind of figure who could walk into a room and command attention without saying a word. His company, one of the world's most influential internet giants, had changed the way people connected online, shaping everything from communication to commerce. Magazine covers celebrated him as the brilliant visionary who had built an empire from a garage startup, and yet those who admired him from afar could never imagine the intricate web of secrecy he wove behind closed doors. From the outside, Ethan's life looked perfect. He lived in a mansion that resembled a modern art museum more than a home, with walls of glass overlooking the city skyline, sprawling gardens, and an infinity pool that glimmered in the California sun. His fleet of luxury cars was the envy of every collector, and his private jet was a symbol of a life untethered by ordinary constraints. He hosted lavish parties where Hollywood stars, tech moguls, and politicians mingled, but even in those glittering rooms, he was careful. Every smile, every handshake, every laugh was calculated, designed to protect his carefully constructed persona. But beneath the luxury and acclaim lay a life of secrecy that few could penetrate. Ethan had a private world that existed far from public scrutiny, a world where personal desires intersected with absolute control. One person who crossed into this hidden realm was Lila Monroe. Lila was different from anyone Ethan had ever known, elegant, intelligent, and strikingly enigmatic. She was an art curator whose rising reputation in the contemporary scene made her a fixture at gallery openings and private exhibitions. Her life was entirely her own, or so it seemed, until she met Ethan. Their connection was immediate but clandestine, a delicate dance that neither could allow the world to witness. Every encounter was orchestrated with precision. Meetings happened in undisclosed locations, restaurants where reservations were made under false names, and apartments in high-rise buildings that offered complete privacy. Encrypted messages replaced phone calls, and even within the digital world, there was caution. Ethan's wealth provided every tool for secrecy security teams, surveillance systems, private investigators, but it also created an environment where control was as essential as air. Lila quickly realized that being involved with Ethan meant stepping into a life that was meticulously managed, a life in which spontaneity was dangerous and privacy was never guaranteed. Despite the thrill of secrecy and the allure of wealth, the relationship carried an undercurrent of tension. Lila often wondered if she was truly in a partnership or if she had become just another piece in Ethan's carefully constructed puzzle. Yet there was an undeniable magnetism, a pull that kept her moving deeper into his world. The contrast between his public charm and the private intensity of their relationship made every interaction feel electrifying and unpredictable. Little did either of them know that the very measures designed to protect their secrecy would soon become the instruments of a much darker narrative, one that neither could have foreseen. The glittering life behind closed doors was only the beginning, and the shadows lurking within it were far more dangerous than the world outside could ever imagine. Lila Monroe had grown accustomed to the careful choreography of her secret relationship with Ethan Callaway, but the delicate balance of their lives began to unravel in ways she could never have anticipated. At first, the signs were small and easily dismissed: a package left at her doorstep with no return address, a shadow glimpsed through her apartment window at odd hours. She told herself it was coincidence, perhaps the work of a prankster or a delivery mix-up. But the incidents became increasingly frequent and unnerving, each one carrying a subtle but unmistakable sense of intrusion. Her personal devices, once trusted tools, began to betray her. Emails she never sent appeared in her sent folder. Files were altered without her knowledge. Even her social media accounts showed strange activity, as though someone was silently monitoring her life. The feeling of being watched grew heavier each day. Lila began noticing subtle patterns in the disturbances, a particular time of day when she would receive cryptic messages, a recurring presence outside her apartment building that vanished the moment she looked directly at it. Anxiety started to seep into the edges of her life, replacing the thrill and excitement that had initially drawn her to Ethan with a gnawing, uncheckable fear. The art gallery she managed, once a sanctuary of creativity and expression, became a stage for increasingly aggressive intrusions. Equipment went missing, storage rooms were found unlocked, and valuable pieces were moved or altered in ways that suggested deliberate tampering. Security cameras captured fleeting glimpses of a figure lingering just beyond their field of view, always careful to remain mostly hidden, leaving no trace but a lingering sense of menace. Every exhibition opening and private viewing carried an undercurrent of tension, as though someone could be observing from the shadows, studying her movements and interactions with a meticulous eye. Lila began documenting every incident, creating a detailed record of each unusual occurrence. She marked times, dates, and descriptions, hoping that the meticulous notes would reveal a pattern or provide proof of what she increasingly suspected: someone close to her, someone who knew her intimately, was orchestrating these intrusions. The sense of violation weighed on her heavily. She realized that her once private world, carefully constructed and controlled, had become a landscape of fear, where familiar surroundings now felt like traps and every unexpected sound could signal danger. Despite her growing unease, Lila could not ignore the complexities of her connection with Ethan. The man she had trusted and shared intimate moments with was at the center of her suspicion, yet she hesitated to confront the possibility directly. The cognitive dissonance of loving someone who might also be threatening her safety left her in a constant state of tension. Friends and colleagues noticed the change in her demeanor. Her once confident stride had become measured, cautious, and alert. She found herself constantly scanning her surroundings, second-guessing encounters, and questioning the motivations of those around her. The intrusions escalated to a point where Lila could no longer rationalize them as mere coincidences. Anonymous emails contained personal details she had never shared publicly. Late-night encounters with strangers outside her building, who disappeared before she could identify them, hinted at a level of surveillance that was both sophisticated and relentless. The stakes were no longer abstract. Her privacy, safety, and sense of autonomy were under siege. The vibrant, secretive affair that had once felt thrilling had transformed into a tense and terrifying reality. Every step she took, every decision she made, was shadowed by the possibility that someone she had once trusted implicitly was watching, waiting, and manipulating her world with calculated precision. The quiet threat that began as subtle unease had grown into a pervasive fear that there was no sanctuary, no place she could truly be alone. The fear that had been quietly building in Lila Monroe's life reached a tipping point, and she realized that silence was no longer an option. The incidents of stalking, tampering, and intrusion had grown too frequent and too precise to ignore. Each moment of her daily life felt infiltrated, from the way she navigated her apartment to the careful scheduling of gallery openings. Even in public, the unease followed her like an invisible weight, and the realization sank in that the person orchestrating these disturbances had access to the deepest corners of her life. It was then that Lila made the decision to take formal legal action, filing a lawsuit against Ethan Callaway. The filing sent tremors through both her world and the public perception of the billionaire. The lawsuit itself was a meticulously constructed document, laying out allegations that painted a shocking portrait of harassment and surveillance. Lila described incidents that seemed almost cinematic in their audacity: private investigators hired to monitor her movements, encrypted logs tracking her daily routines, and repeated intrusions into spaces she had always considered safe. Legal experts who examined the case later noted the unprecedented level of detail in her filings, revealing a pattern of obsession and control that extended far beyond the typical bounds of personal conflict. The court papers suggested that Ethan had used his immense wealth and technological resources to create a network capable of tracking her every move without detection. As the story emerged into the public eye, the reaction was immediate and intense. The tech world, once enamored with Ethan's genius, recoiled as reporters dug into the details. Headlines splashed accusations across media outlets, casting a shadow over his previously untouchable reputation. Social media exploded with speculation, debates, and outrage. People struggled to reconcile the image of a celebrated innovator with the disturbing details outlined in the court filings. For many, the allegations were shocking precisely because they revealed a hidden layer of obsession, control, and danger behind a life that had always seemed glamorous and untouchable. The courtroom became a stage where the intersection of power, wealth, and personal conduct played out under intense scrutiny. Lawyers examined the surveillance evidence, reviewing timestamps, digital footprints, and witness statements that suggested a carefully orchestrated campaign of intimidation. Each document added complexity to the narrative, blurring the line between victim and aggressor and challenging assumptions about privacy and influence in a world where technology could amplify control. Observers noted the tension between the meticulously curated public persona of Ethan Callaway and the troubling private behaviors alleged in the lawsuit, highlighting the disparity between perception and reality. For Lila, the act of filing the lawsuit was both empowering and terrifying. She had stepped into the spotlight not as a celebrity or a public figure, but as someone seeking protection and acknowledgement of the violations she had endured. Each hearing, each deposition, and each piece of evidence presented in court reinforced the stakes. The case was no longer just a private matter. It had become a public spectacle with far-reaching consequences. Investors, colleagues, and fans all watched closely, understanding that the scandal could redefine not only Ethan's career but also the broader conversation about power, privacy, and accountability. The unfolding legal battle exposed a world few could imagine, where wealth and technological prowess intersected with obsession and manipulation. The lawsuit transformed a hidden, secretive relationship into a high-stakes confrontation, revealing the fragility of trust when one person wields disproportionate influence over another. Lila's decision to break her silence ignited a chain of events that would challenge assumptions, provoke intense scrutiny, and keep the public riveted as everyone waited to see how the clash between a billionaire and his secret mistress would ultimately unfold. As the legal battle between Lila Monroe and Ethan Callaway intensified, the story began to reveal layers that no one had anticipated. Evidence collected during the investigation painted a complex and unsettling picture, suggesting that Lila's involvement in Ethan's life went deeper than a simple secret romance. Digital records showed late-night visits to company properties, meetings at undisclosed locations, and encrypted communications that indicated she had access to information few outside the inner circle possessed. Financial transactions further complicated the narrative, hinting at exchanges that were neither casual nor transparent, raising questions about the extent of her engagement in Ethan's world. The courtroom became a battleground where every detail of their intertwined lives was scrutinized. Investigators and experts pored over data logs, emails, and surveillance footage, searching for patterns that could corroborate or refute the allegations. Each piece of evidence seemed to reveal more than just a story of stalking and harassment. It suggested a complex psychological dynamic, a cat-and-mouse game in which both parties were meticulously documenting and anticipating the other's actions. The narrative shifted from one of a powerful man pursuing a mistress to a far more tangled interplay of control, secrecy, and manipulation where boundaries had been blurred and trust had eroded completely. Public perception became increasingly conflicted. Headlines continued to portray Ethan as the tech mogul behind a scandal, yet whispers about Lila's role suggested she was not merely a passive victim. Analysts debated the nuances of the relationship, questioning whether she had willingly entered a world where influence and surveillance intersected or whether she had become ensnared unknowingly in Ethan's obsessive patterns. The revelation that she had been privy to corporate operations and sensitive dealings added a layer of intrigue, complicating the moral and legal questions surrounding the case. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that the stakes extended beyond personal grievances. Investors, board members, and employees watched closely, aware that the scandal could disrupt not only Ethan's personal life, but also the stability of the company he had built. The evidence suggested that the private drama had consequences that rippled outward, influencing decisions, operations, and public perception of the empire. Every new detail released to the public added pressure, forcing both parties to navigate an intricate web of legal and personal risk. The psychological undertones of the case fascinated observers. Courtroom documents hinted at a game of perception and manipulation where each party's actions were calculated to elicit specific responses from the other. The precision of Ethan's surveillance and the sophistication of Lila's countermeasures revealed a struggle that went beyond typical legal disputes, showcasing a battle of intellect, strategy, and awareness. Experts described it as a uniquely modern form of conflict, one in which technology amplified both power and vulnerability, turning private life into a public theater. The case also raised questions about trust and control in relationships shadowed by wealth and influence. While Lila had been initially drawn to Ethan's charm, intellect, and status, the escalation of surveillance and intrusion underscored the fragile boundary between fascination and fear. The story revealed how obsession could intertwine with affection, how secrecy could be weaponized, and how intimacy could transform into surveillance. The twists in the investigation left the public questioning the truth of the events, unsure where victimhood ended and complicity began, and the tension continued to build as both sides prepared for the next stage of confrontation. The courtroom was tense, every corner filled with anticipation as the final stages of the lawsuit unfolded. Weeks of depositions, evidence reviews, and expert testimonies had built a picture of obsession, manipulation, and secrecy that was both mesmerizing and disturbing. Confidential documents revealed meticulous tracking of Lila Monroe's movements, detailed logs of her communications, and reports from private investigators that chronicled her every step. Yet even as these files painted Ethan Callaway as a man consumed by control, other evidence suggested that Lila had been an active participant in navigating his secretive world, creating ambiguity around who truly held power in the relationship. Witness statements added further complexity. Former employees, friends, and associates provided insight into the intensity of Ethan's personality and the depth of Lila's involvement in his private affairs. Each testimony added another layer, revealing interactions and decisions that had never been visible to the public. The courtroom became a space where private lives were dissected under the cold scrutiny of law, and where every revelation seemed to blur the line between victim and accomplice. Observers noted that the psychological tension in the case rivaled any thriller, with both parties appearing to anticipate and counter the actions of the other, each move carefully calculated. The media followed every development, their coverage creating a spectacle that transformed the lawsuit into a cultural phenomenon. Public fascination centered on the contrast between Ethan's public persona as a tech visionary and the hidden side of his life exposed in court documents. Social media erupted with opinions, debates, and theories, with people questioning the ethical boundaries of wealth, privacy, and influence. Headlines alternated between portraying Ethan as a controlling figure and casting Lila as a clever participant navigating a dangerous world, reflecting the ambiguity and intrigue that had permeated the case from the start. As the legal proceedings drew to a close, settlements were quietly negotiated, leaving many of the explosive allegations unresolved in the public eye. Ethan retained control of his company, his empire largely intact despite the scandal, while Lila walked away with a measure of personal vindication, though the questions surrounding her experiences and actions remained. The resolution was anticlimactic to some, yet it underscored a reality often overlooked, even in the most sensational cases. Justice is frequently a balance of strategy, negotiation, and compromise, rather than a clear-cut triumph of right over wrong. The aftermath of the lawsuit left an indelible mark on both their lives. Ethan's reputation, while tarnished, continued to carry weight in the business world, yet the shadow of the scandal lingered, a reminder that private actions can have profound public consequences. Lila emerged as a figure of courage, having stepped into a legal arena dominated by power and resources far beyond her own. The experience reshaped her perspective on privacy, trust, and the cost of secrets, leaving her more cautious but undeniably resilient. Ultimately, the story of Ethan Callaway and Lila Monroe became more than a tale of a billionaire and his secret mistress. It became a cautionary narrative about the intersection of wealth, power, and human vulnerability. It exposed how obsession can hide behind charm, how secrecy can evolve into control, and how the boundaries between love and manipulation can blur when influence and technology amplify every action. The case captivated the public not simply for its scandalous details but for the unsettling truth it revealed. The world of the ultra-wealthy can be as dangerous, unpredictable, and psychologically complex as any crime story, and the consequences of hidden lives can echo far beyond the private walls in which they are concealed.